The Accidental Entrepreneur is brought to you with the help of our sponsor, AWeber, the world's leading small business email marketing and automation service provider. Since 1998, AWeber has helped more than 1 million small businesses and entrepreneurs through its suite of web-based email marketing, automation tools, and education. AWeber, the best option when it comes to marketing your business. The podcast is also brought to you by the Alternative Board. Since 1989, the Alternative Board, or TAB, has been one of the leading peer advisory and business coaching organizations for independent business owners and CEOs across the world. By facilitating peer advisory boards, private one-on-one coaching, and strategic planning services, TAB helps business owners improve their businesses in ways that change their lives. And be sure to connect with our affiliate sponsor, GSM Growth Agency. They're boosting e-commerce businesses to 6 and 7 figures in revenue and cover everything from ads and social media influencers to making your website better. GSM Growth Agency focuses on taking businesses from startup success to bigger success, going above and beyond to make sure growth sticks around. They're all about cool ideas, lasting partnerships, and making your mark in the e-commerce world. And be sure to support the podcast by ordering some logo merchandise from our online store. Listen to all of our sponsors' commercials later in this episode and follow their links in the show notes to learn more about their products and services.
It sucks when you go, post LOI into that next kind of phase. You're in due diligence. You're kind of going through the things a little more granular. Maybe you spend a couple days like really opening up QuickBooks or accounting software, and you're like, wait a second, like these margins were messed with, or they've kind of accelerated some costs, or they've moved some things around. And
then you're thinking, what else is this guy hiding, right?
Yeah, right. Like, and we always try to put our business as like, it's invincible or it's impeccable or whatever. It's just not. Business is messy. I've had one customer at times that don't pay for like 9 months, and I'm trying to chase them down all across the world. Like, it happens, right? And you got to be able to be upfront about that. Like, hey, that was an issue. We didn't evaluate this customer in the right way when we were doing business with them, and like that's just the reality.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast, everyone. I'm Mitch Beinhacker. I'm the host of The Accidental Entrepreneur. If you're first tuning in, I have a special repeat guest today because we had some technical problems last time we were recording. So I appreciate very much that Malcolm's willing to come on and redo this today. So hopefully we won't have any technical problems today. So if you are listening on your favorite directory, leave us a 5-star review. If you're watching us on YouTube, like the channel, subscribe, and keep following us so we can keep connecting with really cool guys like Malcolm. So let's get on with today's show.
The information provided in these episodes is for entertainment purposes only. It is not a guarantee of success or to be construed as advice of any kind. You should always seek advice from local licensed professionals before making any decisions.
The dictionary defines an entrepreneur as a person who organizes and manages any enterprise, especially a business, usually with considerable initiative and risk. People often start a business without much choice, perhaps due to a job loss or just being dissatisfied at work, and they come up with an idea they just know can be successful. They become entrepreneurs by accident. That is to say, their success or failure happens by accident, not with intention. My name is Mitch Beinhacker. I'm a corporate attorney and a business advisor. You're listening to The Accidental Entrepreneur, my podcast about how to achieve success on purpose, not by accident. Join me along with our monthly guests, where we share our knowledge and help you get a hold of your business. And now on to today's episode.
Hello from Texas. I am Malcolm Peace. We run Sincera Growth Partners. I say we because we've got a team behind us, but it didn't always start that way. We now buy blue-collar industrial type businesses, and we add software to them and systems and processes in the hopes that we can scale them up for the next decades to come. We are a actively buying business buyer, hopefully to be able to run these businesses for decades to come after the last owner transitions out. So I hope that I can add value into the show.
All right, Malcolm, I'd say welcome to the show, but really welcome back.
Hey, that intro gets better the second time. Listening to the little tidbits you got dropping in there, I love it, man. I'm certainly accidentally in this space with some intention, but definitely where we landed today is a unique situation. So great intro.
Right. There's no question. No question about it. All right. So maybe we could go back, and I'm watching all the things and the lights to make sure we're recording like we had some problems last time. Yeah, maybe you could tell us about your background, history, and with small business owners or working with business owners. We'll go through that for a while, and then we'll get into Setsera and all the cool stuff you're doing, because it's really a unique approach to business acquisition. I mean, you're helping people with succession planning, and so it's advantageous to you and advantageous to them. So maybe we go back and then we'll move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So my family immigrated from South Africa, and I always bring up that point in these kind of contexts because I really have that first generation American approach. I think is unique in some ways in the sense that they came here
Yeah.
with very little, and I saw them build from the ground up. I always tell people I lived with my grandmother for the first 3 years of my life. I had a nanny that spoke only Spanish. Like I saw my parents hustle and try to figure it out, and some things were successful and some things weren't, and they've kind of paid their own path, right? But for me it was
Right.
really I was like, I got to go pave my own path. So I went and played college tennis, coached a little bit afterwards, and did kind of
There you
that
go.
world. And there was a few relationships that came into that ecosystem, and all of them were small business owners. And I was playing tennis with the dean of the business school on a pretty regular basis, and he, I just kind of shared with him, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. This is what I'm interested in. Here's my ideas. And I always had kind of the idea, but I didn't really know how to put the pieces together, all that kind of stuff. And he, kind of subtly said one day, well, I run this business school. You should apply. And so the rest is kind of history from that. I'm really grateful for him and other relationships that kind of mentored me.
And what school was that,
This was
Malcolm?
at
Where
James.
did you play
I
tennis?
played tennis at James Madison, but this was at the
Sure.
University of Virginia that I went to grad school at, and I was working on the men's tennis team at the time there.
Got it.
All that to be said, really grateful for those relationships. People mentoring
Yeah.
me kind of into a space. But to truth be told, I kind of went with an eyes wide open, don't really know what to expect other than I want to get skilled up. And on the second day of school, or maybe the first, I can't recall at this point, but
Yeah.
very soon starting, I heard this idea of, buying businesses. At the time, it was the search fund, and that's still kind of the model a lot of people follow. But it's this concept of like, there are businesses out there that have to transition. And as a
Right.
result, there's somebody like myself, young, ambitious, full of some ideas, not so good ideas sometimes or whatever, can come in and try to run these
Right.
businesses with little to no down risk side of things, unless, you're trying to, do something way outside your zone. So I was trying to figure out in those 2 years, what is my kind of zone of information and things I know and where am I good at and all this kind of stuff. And so spent 2 years kind of figuring that out. And candidly, came out of school, had some unique projects and internships and all this kind of stuff I was doing.
Right.
And I thought I was really good at kind of streamlining processes. I'm not initially, let's see, sales and marketing. I'm just going to push hard into that. I was like, let me go figure
Right.
out how to just streamline. So my first introduction to that was working with two guys that were doing food and beverage, hospitality, B2C type businesses.
Mhm.
And so they really brought me in to say, hey, we want to build out the B2B side of things. We want to expand kind of our thesis. Can you come in and help us build that out? And I had no idea what I was doing, but I had
Right.
energy and let's go figure it out. And so the rest is
Okay.
history. We started doing deals in food and beverage, hospitality, still kind of on the B2C side at the beginning. And
Okay.
I was really trying to push us into that B2B. We were looking at food distribution companies, food processing companies, and the likes. And in that
Yeah.
time, when you're also sourcing, you're kind of running the existing businesses and building out the existing businesses. We were buying hospitality deals and then adding existing property onto them is really kind of our thesis on the B2C side, is that we could create kind of an
Okay.
ecosystem of properties in Texas that had existing, lodging as well as wedding venues and
Like
things like that.
venue type of stuff?
Exactly. And,
Got it.
in that, again, young energy, let's just go figure it out. I said to myself,
Right. I mean-
I'll be in charge of essentially all the subcontractors that we need to essentially figure out if these projects are viable. And so it would be the,
Right.
civil engineer would come through, the fire marshals and the water protection people and the, the people that are going to look at the septic tank installation and the core sampling
Right. Sure.
guys,
All this stuff.
all this blue collar
Yeah.
guys. And there was one particular, I started learning through this process, what does it look like to essentially roll out systems and a process to source these deals? Again, starting out at the beginning, didn't know what I was doing, but kind of started building a
Right.
process. And, through a few key relationships, essentially realized, hey, I really like this. I like creating systems that have software support rather than just maybe documentation or internal whatever. That
Right.
I thought to myself, hey, where can we add value to this? And I happened to realize, again, kind of whimsical, realized that all the people I was talking to, that we were subcontracting out to, were all the owners, and they were all like 60 to 70 years old, like every single one of them. Maybe the couple that we had,
like the survey company and all the different vendors you were using.
Exactly.
They're old school. Yeah,
exactly.
Right. Sure.
And so what ended up happening was there was a roll-off dumpster and porta potty owner. He was in, kind of come and figure this thing out. We had to deal with the fire marshal and what have you. And he came, and I spent some time with him over a couple of days. We're working through this problem. And I built up a little bit of courage, and I was like, hey, this is not food and beverage. This is something entirely different. But I asked him, like, hey, what is your plan to sell your business? Like, you have built a great reputation. You guys are 5-star in the community. Like, how does that look? And he goes, it's so funny. My business partner's son is actually having this exact conversation with us, and we think we're going to transition the business to him for the next year or two. And it really kind of like allowed me to stand out on my own. Like, I've always felt like I needed to be a part of something, not starting at the beginning. Starting from 0 to 1 is incredibly difficult. And so I always wanted to attach myself to somebody to learn. Over that period of time, I learned a tremendous amount that still influences what I do today. But that was the moment for me, turning point of kind of end of 2019, where I realized, hey, wait a second, like maybe there's a world in which I can do this by myself. Right. And so moving into 2020, COVID happens, everybody's lives change. What we were like under contract for kind of fell apart. I had headhunted a new CEO for a business that we were looking at. I'd done all this stuff. And really, honestly, I looked at myself that summer and said, what am I doing? Why am I sitting at home with my kids out of school and stressed out about this? My wife was working in the travel industry, and so she was incredibly stressed. And I was like,
she was definitely shut down. Right.
And so I was like, let's go grab the reins and let's go do this. And so, that summer kicked it off. It was just me learning and figuring out, got our first deal under contract. That ended up falling apart. I learned a lot during that experience. Honestly, starting in 2021 and kind of moving forward, started building out the team and perfecting the thesis and what we could do value wise and how we would do our playbook. And so the rest is history from that perspective. But it was, these whimsical conversations that allowed for unique learning times.
So let me ask you a question. If we go back when you were in the learning phase or still discovering this stuff, so it was originally a food service business, B2C, which sounds like more like catering or stuff like that.
Yeah, we looked at catering
and then
companies.
B2C, what kind of right? And you said that you put in systems not for necessarily business development, but what kind of systems were you putting in to improve the functionality of the business?
Yeah, great question. Honestly, a lot of it came back to reporting, getting information that was in a disseminated area and getting it to a place where we could actually utilize it and make inferences. And that's still what I do today, right? Like we were taking information, it was all gathered, in different pockets with different people and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't brought to how do we operate this as like true leaders within this organization rather than just putting out fires that come about. And so that was what I felt like I really added value to. And then part of that is, being able to create systems that talk to each other, software that communicated with one another needed to happen. And, all that to be said, that just transitioned into the business development side and finding these deals and creating CRMs that actually had value, like unlike a many that just kind of sit out there dormant. Like we were trying to actually do something. And that's when I realized, like, again, a world I didn't come from. World I hadn't seen and got an experience from, this can be actually valuable and tangible. Now it's very mainstream, but back then I didn't feel like I really knew what I was doing, nor that it was as mainstream.
Right. So you said that the systems you're putting in place would help you, forget what you said, to source the deals or to
disseminate the information that was kind of in different pockets, bring it and aggregate it in such a way that we could actually make inferences on.
Of businesses that you may be evaluating
or the portfolio companies, the ones we were existing. Yeah.
Got it. And the same thing with the real estate, right? Yep. You streamlined a system to help you better evaluate real estate.
Absolutely. The venues. And just honestly, the project and communication and follow up with all the subs, like the exhaustion of constantly following up with people needed to have a system. And so we started building that, creating timelines, creating management, kind of all that kind of stuff. Again, to most people, it's project management. To me, like 9 times out of 10 in these small businesses, they don't exist. And so it may May not seem that novel, but it's fairly novel still. So, that was what we were doing. And I thought to myself, man, like this guy is the one that I'm talking to, or continuously, I was always talking to the owner of these businesses. And I thought, hey, you've probably got a pretty good business. Like, how is this going to look when you transition out of this? And they didn't have answers.
Right.
9 times out of 10, they didn't really have an answer.
Yeah, and 9 times out of 10, they don't have the systems for somebody to just come and take over the business. It doesn't exist. So you kind of have two models, right? You have one system where you evaluate businesses and source businesses, and then when you get under the hood, what are the kind of things? Because I think it's a valuable discussion for small business owners, people that are listening, to kind of in their own head say, well, do I have these systems? Do I even have systems? Do I use a system, even if it's in a binder? I mean, I don't even see that. So what kind of things do you see when you get involved in a business in terms of what's missing, and then how do you go about correcting it?
Yeah, great question. So we have learned over the years. So in anything I say, full caveat that it's what's worked for us in this current day, and it might change in the future.
Yeah, okay, I understand. No guarantees.
No guarantees.
Just opinions.
Right? But we needed to create frameworks that resonated with the general population of the businesses that we were owning, buying, evaluating, all that kind of stuff. And keep in mind, right? So what I think we're talking about is there's a very select few of people that are doing this regular, actively wanting to be involved in. And honestly, in my shoes, like very few people that are buying, and it's kind of, private business buying is a very like niche thing that's kind of set to the side. So we needed to figure out.
You and I said that it's not an organized marketplace, right? Yeah,
that's right.
You can't just find these things, right? Yeah, well, that's some of the secret, right? That's the secret sauce. If you can find these things that are, gems that you sourced yourself, it's not like you're going to have much competition, right?
Absolutely. I think so too. And so what we figured out is a lot of these businesses have a lot of information flowing through the owner. And so one of the things that typically is the case is a lot of them have sales oriented stuff through them. And so we created a framework, or I stole it from somebody, and I can't give them credit anymore because I've forgotten where I got it. But what we call it our P&L top-down approach. And so what we do is anything related to the business that is like urgent, things we need to do, things we need to implement, all that kind of stuff, it always follows in a hierarchy of a top-down of a P&L. So if it's a revenue-related thing, it's always at the top. Then we go to cost of goods sold, cost of labor, anybody that's implementing the service or producing the things we're doing, or the machinery that we use to produce or whatever. And then down below is kind of any operational thing. So coming in and being able to make decisions like, what's the revenue situation? Sometimes we need to implement people down in the operations, but we don't need to build the most elaborate, robust operational aspect. I just need to know, like, what is the customer mix, and who are the actual pain in the back customers? Because a lot of that information is sitting with the owner, and it's like second sense now, where they just kind of just do it. But there's a ton of information right there to make us actually create a stable business that can transition. And so that's the way we approach it.
Who are they doing business with, right? Who are the most profitable people to do business? Who do you like to do business? That type of stuff.
That's right. And so I met with an owner this last week, and we're looking at a business, government contracted servicing company, and nice business. But the owner, like, his direct quote was, "I'll be able to tell you who is the one to do business with and who to not do business with." Well, that's all great and good.
That's a problem.
That's the problem. Yeah. Exactly. And that's like an underappreciation of how big of a problem that is. Right. And so I try to explain that. And so when we're going through our transition point, like, I'm trying to explain, like, what you think is just natural and just comes to you very easily, like, that is all going to have to be taught and documented at some point. And so,
and it probably took him 20 years to get there. It's not like he's just going to say, "Here you go, Malcolm." You're like, "Oh, yeah." We looked at a business like that too. It was, I forget what kind of business it was, but the owner was 94 years old. Wow. He knew every deal. He knew what the relationships were. And I said, "Well, what does this guy do?" "Well, he comes to me and then he shows it to me and I evaluate it." I go, "What happens if you're, no offense, dead?" And he died during the due diligence with this group that we were working with, looking at I knew this was going to happen. Like, he wasn't sick, but his wife had passed away. That's why he wanted to sell the business and the children, and he had life stresses on
Things
him, and
happen, yeah.
he was also 94, so he expired, whatever. Wow. So right in the middle of it. So
I've never had that happen. That is a terrible story to have heard, and
right?
that can throw a wrench in everyone's plans.
Right.
That's the reality that we live in, and I'm it's just one of those challenges. And candidly, like, being able to take, again, I think that's information that's centrally located in some form or fashion, if it's a person or whatever it may be, and like creating an understanding of that. And so when we do that, our first priority is always, again, going down the P&L, like, what's the revenue situation going on? Where do the actual sales come from? How dependent am I on this salesperson? How dependent am I on this marketing channel? Whatever it may be, like, let's get quantifiable about that. And that's just what we've learned over the years. So I said at the beginning, like, I was a orientation around kind of operations and streamlining communication. Now I have a framework where it just makes sense from a hierarchy perspective, I think, to focus on that. And so that allows us, when we've transitioned to be the new owners of the business, to create this culture of like, hey, this is a long-term perspective. We're not trying to flip this business over the next 3-5 years. We're going to hold on to this business for a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. And so as a result, we're going to make decisions that are in that interest. And so sometimes employees, team members, like, they're like, we need to solve this problem now. I'm like, no, you don't realize that, like, that sale situation over there is about to go away with that owner, and I need to really remedy that first. And so that's a hard transition, and it makes my job rewarding long-term when people recognize all those things come together, but it also makes it quite challenging at the beginning as we make that transition.
I think business owners, ones that are listening, a lot of people want to sell their business, right? But they don't think it's possible, whatever. You kind of have to prepare for that stuff. Like, don't have, you come into a business and you see that the owner's 94 and his top sales guy is, 72. Like, how much time are you going to get out of these people? And if you can't extract the information because it doesn't exist anywhere, it's a huge risk. As good as the business is, because if it's in their head, you can't get it out in time. You're in, or the guy says, you know what, if such and such is selling the company, I'm leaving, I'm going to retire. Okay, well, now you got a problem, right? So I think those are factors that a lot of people don't really think about. Like, just because I have great people, are those great people going to stay? Are they incentivized to stay? Is there information somewhere that's I work with nonprofits like chambers and things like that. And if they have an office manager who's been there since they started 45 years ago, and he or she is the only person who knows really what goes on in the office, you better get that in a book somewhere. Like, written down, So I'm sure those are risk factors that you look at, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I say this, like, with full respect. Like, there is a set of businesses out there right now that are being started by 50, 55, 60-year-old folks that are still in the game, or maybe they're younger and they're in the game already. And 20 years, 15 years from now, they're going to be in a position they want to sell, and I'll be in that position I want to buy still. And so all that to be said, like, I'm trying to disseminate the information that works for us right now so that we can hopefully in the future continue to buy these businesses and they're in a better shape and they transition even better, and it de-risks everything for us and all that kind of stuff. But it's inevitable. A business is going to start and a business is going to transition. It's either going to transition to no longer existing or going to transition to a new set of hands. I prefer the latter, right? And so that's our goal, is to be in that position where we can transition that business well. And we've created some of that momentum ahead of time so that it can do that well. And to your point, right? Like, there's so much information that we take for granted within key employees and people and all this kind of stuff, that we spend so much time just getting that information out of their heads. I had a situation, I tell this story, I won't tell you the business obviously, but I had an owner, we were at a Bazillion Steakhouse. This was like the lunch to close the deal. Had a great conversation. In that conversation, he proceeded to let me know a detail I didn't know before, is that all his sales calls come to his personal number, and that he has been known to answer phone calls even when he's in the shower. And so all that to be said, like, he was proud of that. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, this business is not going to transition well. And so
that's terrible.
Yeah. And so, like, that's the thing that had to happen at the beginning of the business when you're getting started, because you're the person. Maybe you have one person join you, but eventually that business has to transition out of that phase. And it can either be done, basically with me coming in and transitioning it, or you've done it ahead of time. If you've done it ahead of time, you will get a better outcome on the sale of your business, without a doubt.
Of course.
And so
Yeah.
versus me, I'm like, hold on, just so you know, I'm taking on this risk. And then here's how I'm going to create terms that mitigate that risk, because you never know, that person that you have as a big long-term customer of yours, and they can't get a hold of you on a cell phone call anymore, like they might walk away tomorrow and all that revenue that was historical to the business is gone. And so that's the risks we have to mitigate for. And it can be a hard conversation when it's been put on their shoulders for so long.
Yeah, sure. And you're right. Customers are fickle and they're used to doing business a certain way and they don't like when it changes.
That's right.
Especially if they have choice, right, to go other places. Now, you said you mostly work with manufacturing companies, right? Companies that have hard locations and equipment and, systems and I don't know, production lines, things like that.
Yeah. I wish they were that sophisticated when we come in, but they, we have some semblance of that. Right. But right. we love blue collar industrial type businesses in Texas. And I really describe it as we love businesses where people's hands get dirty, machines get moving, all that kind of stuff, where there's tangible work being done typically in the day. And so that's across Texas broadly. And we want to be here for a long, long time. And so as a result, we're building that thesis where we want to be the best at this. And so, we started in manufacturing, we've expanded, and we're continuing to expand outside of that as kind of the scope of what we look for and what we're buying. We're actively in the market right now to buy businesses that we think have high quality capability to transition. Everyone knows the studies from a quick Google search. Businesses tend to struggle sometimes on the transition. And so we're looking for ways where we can say, hey, we are a good fit as well as your business is a good fit for us. And it has to be kind of that mutual situation that allows us to come in and really add tangible value. So you're driving down the street and you see the building and it's got 10 more trucks in it and it's grown 5 years later. And you can tell everybody, that's the business you started, because starting's the hardest part.
Yeah.
We're just doing the fun part of hopefully bringing the business to that next phase.
Right. That was a little business I started that I couldn't make any money on. Now they're doing $40 million a year in gross revenue.
Hey, that's a dream. We'll try. So that's our goal.
If they participate in it. Yeah. So you're like Marcus Lemonis on The Profit, where you go to the company's location into their warehouse and there's just shit everywhere. And
I'm not gonna lie. I think I've seen every episode of that show. Right.
Just kind of what you do.
Yeah.
Or at least what you look at initially.
Yeah. He buys a lot of things, or at the time when he was doing that. I know he's kind of transitioned now. He was buying a lot of businesses that were really struggling. We love businesses that have been flat. They've just been consistently flat for 5 years. Maybe they've gone up 5%, down %, but they're relatively flat. That's a business that's proven and has market capabilities. People like the product. There's consistent buyers to some extent coming back to them. But it's an opportunity where, like, if we put some gas behind this, both energy and financially, like, what could this become? And so that's kind of the way we look at it. We think businesses are capped sometimes by the culture that they currently have. And we think that we can create a culture that people aspire to. I had a supervisor on Monday this week, sit in my office. His uncle had just passed away. I kind of asked him, what do you need from me? He said, I don't need anything from you. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to run through a brick wall for you. Like, and that's like, genuine guy.
Good to hear.
And yeah, that's what I'm here for. Yes. Like, I want to build a culture where people want to be a part of what we're doing. And I think that there's a ton of research behind, people being a part of a culture that they can aspire in and grow in and develop in. Just everybody benefits. So that's what we try to do.
Big time. Yeah. And it's, look, that's the formula of success, right? Not only are you running efficiently, but all your people are on board and they buy into your vision and they like being there and they treat it like it's their own. Yep. The reason that Marcus Lemonis looks at businesses struggling is because it makes better TV than you coming into some business. You and I do a TV episode of business just flat.
I can still give you some stories, though. That's for sure.
I'm sure. And I'm sure there's surprises when you think it's flat and you find out that the business is 99% of the business come from one vendor or something like that.
Oh, we have that. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So why don't we do this? Let's take a brief break and play the commercials, and then we come back. Maybe we can. You don't have to give any names, but I'd love to hear some stories about. Yeah, we did some due diligence, and I think we talked about some of this in the last episode that didn't make it to the cutting floor. But some stories about things we were looking at and we got surprised, or maybe after you bought it, or during the due diligence. I think you have a couple of those, if I remember right.
Happy to share.
All right, let's take a break.
Here's a word from our sponsors.
Looking to market and grow your business? Or perhaps you're just getting started and want to hit the ground running? AWeber is the best choice for online email marketing and automation of your business. From maintaining a subscriber list to drip campaigns and landing pages, AWeber gives you tools and integrations that make marketing easy and fun. As our partner and sponsor, we use all their tools to promote the podcast and market our law firm. AWeber, the best alternative for online marketing. For over 30 years, the Alternative Board, or TAB, has built a thriving community of forward-thinking CEOs and business owners who want to radically improve their companies. Through unique combinations of one-on-one business coaching, participation in monthly TAB board meetings with other non-competing owners, a suite of strategic tools, and customized strategic planning workshops, TAB membership can deliver greater strength to your business and a better work-life balance for you and your family. All packaged in a streamlined and affordable service that the people at TAB invite you to try risk-free. Are you struggling with managing advertising due to a lack of time or expertise? Perhaps you're facing challenges in scaling ads for your store. Are you feeling lost when strategies have no success? GSM Growth Agency is your reliable partner in overcoming these business challenges. Feel the impact of collaborating with a team dedicated not only to short-term goals, but also to building long-term partnerships and achieving sustained success. Embark on an exciting journey to redefine the possibilities of e-commerce and create a legacy of unparalleled excellence. Take decisive action now. Follow their link in the show notes to receive a complimentary audit of your Shopify store conducted by a GSM expert. Propel your e-commerce game to new heights with GSM Growth Agency. Follow the link in the show notes to learn more about all of our sponsors. And now back to our show. All right, we're back. Thanks for your patience. And I guess our internet connection's still working, so that's all good, right?
There we go.
Yeah. So maybe we could, I know we did it last time, but for the new listeners, since that didn't make it out, do you have some stories about, hey, that you learned? We were doing due diligence and we thought in the last minute something came up and we killed the deal, and another story could be, oh, yeah, well, we did the due diligence. We got into the deal, 6 months down the road. We're like, what the heck? I wish I knew that then. You got some of those?
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people buying businesses and transitioning businesses is not easy. There's a ton of skeletons in the closet. People have things that they maybe don't want to share for whatever reason. And I think most of it's not, fraud or what have you. It's just people hadn't thought of it or they didn't bring it up for whatever reason. So, I always say if we can, let's get this all out on the front end. I'd love to be able to do this on the front end and not get, ultimately confused when things kind of come awry after the fact. And so the front end sometimes is the pre of the letter of intent, the LOI. We'll have those conversations. And I've had situations where, I start asking about revenue mix and come to find out, like it wasn't presented to me initially. They maybe sent me their raw P&Ls and there's some, mixing numbers and confusion stuff there. And we start kind of picking a couple pieces apart and come to find out that big revenue mix is going from one particular customer or, the person that used to have that, it was like a long-term contract and it doesn't show up on AR anymore. They kind of ran that, revenue up, but it's actually still sitting in AR and they're going to take it with them and kind of all those kind of questions. Right. So like we try to dive into that a bit. And then I've had situations where, the owner's been like, we can run this part of this business as a cash business. And I'm like, wait a second, what are you doing? And so we've had all sorts of conversations like that. And I've had, things where I've gone on site and people have been super open with me. And then it's not so much a financial thing. It's a personnel issue. Like, yeah, we had an employee that used to work for us. He left like 5 years ago. He started his own company and now he takes our lunch. Right. Like, and that's the truth. Right. I had this last owner that I met with and kind to share everything with me, but he was going through 5 different lawsuits and 3 had settled and 2 are still pending. Right. Like I'm super grateful for that kind of approach with an owner where they're not hiding things. It's like, hey, like here's how it is. Let's have these conversations because it sucks when you go, post LOI into that next kind of phase. You're in due diligence. You're kind of going through the things a little more granular. Maybe you spend a couple days like really opening up QuickBooks or accounting software and you're like, wait a second, like these margins were messed with, or they've kind of accelerated some costs, or they've moved some things
Yeah.
around. And
Then you're thinking, what else is this guy hiding, right?
yeah, right. Like, and we always try to put our business as like, it's invincible or it's impeccable or whatever. It's just not. Business is messy. I've had one customer at times that don't pay for like 9 months, and I'm trying to chase them down all across the world. Like, it happens, right? And you got to be able to be upfront about that. Like, hey, that was an issue. We didn't evaluate this customer in the right way when we were doing business with them. And like, that's just the reality. We hope it's a one-off situation, but that's where it is. And that might create pause. The reality is, in the situation I'm in, like, we can be incredibly patient on the type of businesses that we're looking at. And so those owners often can't, they're aging, and they've got circumstances of life. Let's just have the conversation, and let's figure out a way where the terms and the price makes sense to mitigate the risk that you're not sharing or sharing with me. Yeah, I've had it all. And so, I've been in situations when we've been through due diligence where someone got a PO for a business that we looked at and went under contract with. They got a PO for a big purchase order, and they wanted $1 million more for their business, and they couldn't really justify that price, but that's just what they felt. They thought the future was really great and they weren't getting to share in it. So they wanted to have an ability to share in it now. And so trying to explain to them, hey, I'm going to have to deal with the staffing up and facilitating and all that kind of stuff to handle that PO. That's great. That came in. But that didn't resonate. And that person, I think they sold the business in the end. I'm really not sure. That was many years ago now. And, they were a big fish in a small city. And, as a result, like, they felt like they could kind of command the conversation. And so, challenges, right? There's all these kind of challenges. It's, we're walking into businesses that are made up of humans and non-dependable revenue at times and all this kind of stuff that it's a bit different versus, if I were to go buy a software company that has really, really good subscriptions, we're going to pay a different multiple, right? So that's the challenge that I try to explain to a business owner.
Right. Well, I think business owners need to learn to keep better books and records. I mean, don't run your business so you can just avoid taxes and take as much deductions as you have, because when you look at their financials and their tax returns and their P&Ls, not going to make any sense. Yeah. And then they're going to try and convince you how all these things that they've been bleeding out of their business should be added back because you recapture them when you start. And maybe that's sometimes true, usually